Hi, I'm Christian from DragonSports and the Welsh Sports channel, and I'm going to be reviewing how the regions got on this weekend in the URC. Let's start with the Dragons. Not a good weekend for the Dragons again. After last week against Ulster, they showed some fight, and realistically, if they had a decent goal kicker, they would have won that game. But going into Edinburgh away, it's never an easy game, but Edinburgh's form is up and down, but Dragons were just never in this game from the start. Edinburgh come flying out of the gates, and the Dragons just couldn't handle it. The kicking out of hand was awful. Darcy Graham had an absolute field day. Then the discipline started falling off from the Dragons, and before half-time, Edinburgh had already racked up the bonus point win. The second half, the Dragons came out, and to be fair, they showed a bit of fight, but the game was already done. The Dragons were never coming back into it, and it's just yet another defeat on a really disappointing season for the Dragons, and it's really tough for their supporters to keep turning up and watching these games. 38-5 it ended up on the day, and rooted to the bottom of the table with one win all season. The second game of the weekend was of course the pick of the weekend games, and it was the derby between the Scarlets and the Ospreys at Parker Scarlets, and this was a funny game. The Scarlets ended up ultimately running out 38-22 winners, but this was such a weird game, quite scrappy, really sort of end-to-end, lots of mistakes, with the Ospreys actually running out with about 17 points lead at the start. Scarlets were all over the place, lots of mistakes, trying to play from positions where they didn't really need to, mistakes from the centres. Eddie James, in particular, dropped a couple of balls, and it was just poor, and it was really sloppy from the Scarlets, with a couple of Josh McLeod turnovers keeping them in the game and some big defensive efforts. And then ill discipline started creeping in from the Ospreys as Scarlets began to get a foothold in the game, and then slowly they began to build momentum and get the ball into the back's hands, which is of course their strength. And then once they started going through the phases, the Ospreys really started to struggle. More men in the bin, and the floodgates kind of opened then. The bonus point win for the Scarlets, and a real disappointing game for the Ospreys. A few players that stood out. Max Page was excellent again, looks so much better on the wing than he does at centre in my opinion. But ultimately, the whole backline for the Scarlets, once they got going, they sort of ripped the Ospreys defence apart, and it puts a little bit of a halt on the marching steam train that was this team under Mark Jones, and they're going to have to go back to the drawing board, because of course next week they have each other again, which is crazy, in the European Cup. To be honest, even though it was pretty comfortable for the Scarlets, I don't think this has any bearing on what's going to happen next week. I still think they go into this game 50-50. Maybe even it galvanises the Ospreys, and we're going to see at least a Welsh team into the quarterfinals of a European Cup, which is a positive. And then the final game of the weekend, Cardiff again. How many times are they going to do this to themselves? They got themselves in an excellent position to win a game, and yet they managed to lose it. Always competitive, but they just can't seem to get over that hump and can't seem to just nail a win. Obviously, it was an excellent win last weekend, and you thought maybe it started to click. They've started picking up more wins this season than they did last season, but this was a microcosm of the rest of the season. Similar to the other teams, ill discipline started coming in, and it gave Benetton a foothold in the game. Benetton themselves weren't great, to be honest, but Cardiff just kept giving them opportunities. One thing that sticks in the mind was Ben Donnell. He gives away a penalty at a maul, which allows exit, and then from that ensuing line out, he gives another penalty away at the maul, and then they get into the corner and eventually score from it. And then like 5 minutes later, he gets a yellow card for not retreating and giving a high tackle or an upright tackle on a quick tap. And he wasn't the only one. There was yellow cards for Cam Winnett as well. Rory Jennings was the other one to pick up a yellow for Cardiff. And then that sort of allowed Benetton to stay in the game. They weren't great. They made mistakes as well, but they just sort of neither team wanted to win. It was back and forth, both teams making mistakes, giving away penalties. Eventually Cardiff get an opportunity, and it's a great finish from Evan Lloyd, who peels off a maul probably a little bit earlier than he wanted to, but just sort of carries 3 or 4 players over the line, and it's an excellent finish. And with just under 10 minutes left, you think Cardiff are going to sneak away with a result here, and it would be a great result and really give them a chance to hit that top 8. But Callum Sheedy misses a really regulation conversion, making the gap only 2 points. And then what happens? Cardiff fail to just be disciplined and exit and go through their processes and just kill the game, eventually leading to Benetton getting the chance for a 3 points, and of course he nails it, meaning Cardiff lose by 1 point, 19 points to 20. And you know, a losing bonus point out in Benetton is okay, but from the positions they had, they should easily be winning, and it is a microcosm of the season. But I'll be back with you later on in the week for the preview of the games to come next weekend. This has been Christian with DragonSports. Thanks for watching.